Welcome back, everyone. My name is Johnny. This channel is called Prepping Life, and welcome to episode 5 of What's Prepping Wednesdays. Let's get into this week's topic of conversation. A while back, a channel that I've been watching for a very long time, named Really Big Monkey 1, all one word, no spaces, had gotten tagged, and he did a response video to the tag. He was tagged by, I believe, Laconian Concepts tagged him. And the tag is 5 tips for beginning wild campers. And so I've thought about this, and it's been a few weeks. It's been a short minute. So I decided that for this week's episode, I would come up with my 5 tips for beginning wild campers. These tips are in no particular order. I picked a subject to kind of cross all 5 of them, in that things that I think that beginning wild camper should learn. And when I think of wild camping, I think of primitive camping, or I don't know, maybe even potentially urban stealth camping. These tips, I believe, are pertinent to both. But they're all things that I think that person should learn and get good at. First one, I want to talk about learning to make fire. It's not just about taking a Bic lighter and lighting a piece of paper on fire. It's not just about how to use a ferro rod. It's not just about how to use a flint and steel. I remember, when I was a kid, Smokey Bear would say, a single cigarette butt could burn down the whole forest. Now, there's a story behind how I got to that. It's been about, I guess about 10 years ago or so, maybe longer. Maybe longer than that. Me and my buddy Drew, great guy. We were out doing some bushcrafting stuff. Even before we were even really knew it to call it bushcraft. And it was a bit of a kind of dewy, kind of drizzly, kind of foggy morning or / afternoon. And we were trying to get a fire going. Just to kind of be able to enjoy a campfire. Be able to, just be outdoors. And have a chance to warm up here and there. And he looked at me and he said about the whole Smokey Bear thing, saying that a single cigarette butt could burn down the entire forest. And he was like, yeah, well, it's taken us 2 rednecks, 3 Bic lighters, and about 4 hours to get this thing to barely smolder. And that was when he and I both decided it was probably actually time to up our game a little bit and actually learn how to go out and build a fire. Knowing how to make fire, super, super important. For a number of reasons. It creates warmth for you. It's a morale booster. Sometimes I just like to sit around the campfire in the evening and watch the fire. So that's, and these are in no particular order. I'm going to call that number 1 because it's the first one I spoke about. Learning to make shelter and where. And when I say make shelter, that can be anything, especially for a beginning camper. That can be anything from knowing how to set up a small tent, to building some elaborate bushcraft shelter. Learn how to do that kind of thing, and learn where. And when I say where, I mean like if you're in a tarp shelter, if you're making your shelter out of a tarp, you want to learn how to angle that. I typically, if I'm going to do like a lean-to or a plow point or something, I want the wind to blow this way across the front. I don't want it to blow this way, and I don't want it to blow this way. If it blows this way, it's going to take that smoke from your campfire and draw it right back in. This also applies to urban camping. If you're going to bed down for the night in an urban setting, you need to learn where to do that so that you can do it in a safe manner. If everybody wants in the comments, let me know. I'm thinking about doing some more videos about that. I did some videos about that on my previous channel a few years ago, but I would be more than willing to go back and rehash those types of things. So how and where, definitely on the shelter making. Learn how to do that and get good at it. How to purify water. And I don't just mean get it out of the tap. I don't just mean buy a Sawyer Mini or a LifeStraw or any of the other many and various water purification systems out there. There's a bunch of different ways to purify water and to filter it. I mean, you can filter it through a cloth, and you can use tablets and blah, blah, yada, yada. You can boil it. There's a bunch of different ways to purify water. Learn a few of them. Especially if you're a beginner, because if you're a beginner, you're probably not knowing these things, and at that point, you probably wouldn't be watching this video, especially if you're new to the channel. Oh, and if you are new to the channel, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Or if you don't dig my content, don't subscribe. That's fine too. I'm here to hopefully be a little bit entertaining, hopefully a little bit educational. I do these videos for me. Anyway, another biggie for me on my list, I guess that'd bring us up to number 4. And again, these are no particular order. How to tie knots. I mean, anybody can put a knot in a string, but certain knots are good for certain things. Like one of my favorites, most people call or my Canadian YouTuber that I watch, they call it a Canadian jam knot, and a lot of other people here in the States call it that also. But there's a ton of knots out there for different things. I'm also a big fan of prusik knots. When I'm hammock camping, I use them on my ridgeline, things like that. Super simple to tie. Maybe I should do some videos on that too if you guys don't already know how to make these different knots. But making knots is important. And not only that, different types of cordage like different kinds of knots better than some. Like there's some knots that paracord just doesn't like. Or maybe the knots don't like the paracord. But they'll do great with some bank line. I use paracord pretty typically, so I use the knots that work for me. Get good at tying knots. And then the last one I want to talk about is probably the least pleasant to talk about. How and when and where to use the restroom. I'm not going to get into specifics. You definitely want it to be quite a ways from your camp. You want it to be quite a ways away from where you make your food. And if you're by a water source, you want it to be quite a ways downstream from where you are, because you may be using that water source. And at that point, you don't want the things that you're putting in it in that water source. So learn about that kind of stuff, because that's important too. Anyway, I hope this video has been at least partially educational, partially entertaining, and until next week, folks, this has been another episode of What's Prepping Wednesdays. I love you all. And as always, be safe, have fun, and peace out.